They called it Zone 5th. Prosecutors called it a violent federal racketeering enterprise rooted in Rock Island, Illinois. What started as a neighborhood-based clique tied to the Arsenal Court/Fifth Street area evolved into one of the most serious gang cases the Quad Cities has ever seen. According to federal indictments, members and associates operated for years across Rock Island and Davenport, tied together by shootings, drug trafficking, firearms, and retaliation meant to build fear, money, and reputation. Investigators say violence wasn't random. It was organized, coordinated, and enforced through street loyalty and silence. By 2023, federal authorities dropped a sweeping RICO conspiracy indictment, naming over a dozen members and associates. The case outlined murders, attempted murders, drug distribution, and gun crimes spanning nearly 2 decades. In 2024 and 2025, sentencing began, with some defendants receiving decades in federal prison, effectively dismantling the structure prosecutors say controlled large portions of the Rock Island street drug trade. This wasn't Chicago. This wasn't Memphis. This was Rock Island. And the case proved that small city crews can still draw big federal attention when violence becomes routine. If you lived in the Quad Cities during this era, what do you remember about Zone 5th? Drop a comment and follow for part 2. Davenport, Iowa. Quad Cities. If you've heard the name Savage Life, this isn't just a street nickname that floated around. It's a name that shows up in federal court language tied to violence, retaliation, and racketeering-style prosecutions. Federal authorities have referred to a Davenport-based group known as the Savage Life Boys, often shortened to SLB, as part of a criminal enterprise in federal cases connected to shootings, murders, and long-running street conflicts in the Quad Cities area. In multiple DOJ sentencing announcements tied to Quad Cities RICO conspiracies, prosecutors described decades of violence involving rival crews, with Savage Life identified as one of the street groups involved in that ecosystem of retaliation and gun violence. Here's where it gets serious. Once the feds step in, it's no longer about one shooting or one arrest. RICO turns patterns of violence into enterprise charges, meaning members don't just face time for a single incident, they face stacked federal sentences for participating in the organization itself. In these Quad Cities cases, prosecutors linked shootings, murders, and ongoing feuds together to justify major prison time at sentencing. That's the shift people underestimate. What might look like neighborhood beef on the street can become decades in federal prison once prosecutors argue structure, membership, and repeated acts of violence. And Savage Life, according to federal case language, ended up inside that net. This is why Davenport and the Quad Cities have quietly drawn federal attention over the years. Smaller cities, long memories, and violence that doesn't stay isolated. If you want part 2, I'll break down the specific federal indictments, timelines, and sentencing language, including how RICO was applied and what that meant for people named in court. Do you think RICO actually reduces street violence, or does it just reshuffle the board and create new power vacuums? Follow for more OC Street Files. Subscribe for the full breakdown. What happens when a local street crew grows so large the feds step in and call it an enterprise? In Davenport, Iowa, that question led straight to the lowriders. Federal prosecutors say the lowriders weren't just a neighborhood gang. They were a structured organization involved in drug trafficking, gun violence, and intimidation that stretched across the Quad Cities. According to court records, members moved narcotics, carried firearms, and enforced loyalty through fear and retaliation. The investigation didn't happen overnight. Authorities spent years building cases using wiretaps, surveillance, and cooperating witnesses. By 2020, the hammer dropped. Dozens of arrests, federal indictments, and racketeering charges. Prosecutors labeled leadership as organizers, not just participants. Some defendants received double-digit federal sentences, including the alleged leader, who was sentenced to more than 20 years in prison. But here's the real debate. Are agencies attacking a symptom while ignoring the disease? Aren't gangs really just social costs? Poverty breeding crime?